It is October 11th, 1492. In the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, 90 unwashed, desperate men are entirely convinced they are about to die. They have been sailing into the absolute unknown for 36 days. Below the deck of the Santa Maria, the stench is unbearable. A mix of rotting garlic, stagnant bilge water, and unbathed bodies. Scurvy is creeping into their gums. Mutiny isn't just a whisper. It is a loaded weapon, pointed directly at the back of Christopher Columbus. Exactly 3,000 miles away, on a lush island the locals call Guanahani, life is thriving. A Taino fisherman casts a woven net into crystal clear shallows, unaware that monstrous wooden vessels are bleeding through the horizon. These are two entirely separate planets, two ecosystems, two completely distinct streams of human evolution. For over 10,000 years, the Atlantic Ocean has acted as an impenetrable vault, keeping the civilizations of the Americas hidden from the empires of Eurasia. Neither knows the other exists, but in less than 24 hours, that vault will crack open. The resulting collision will reshape the global economy, rewrite the biological makeup of the Earth, and ignite the most violent, transformative era in human history. This isn't just the story of a lost sailor bumping into a continent. This is the autopsy of the moment the modern world was born. To understand why 3 wooden ships are risking oblivion in the open ocean, we have to look at the daily reality of 15th century Europe. It is not an era of endless gold and romantic exploration. It is a continent recovering from the Black Death, suffocated by borders, and desperately hungry. Life for the average European is a grueling cycle of manual labor. If you are a peasant in Castile or Genoa, your diet consists of coarse barley bread, thin pottages, and salted meat that is often on the verge of turning rancid. To make this decaying food palatable, you need one thing: spices. Black pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves. But spices aren't just for flavor. They are medicine, status symbols, and preservatives. Pound for pound, pepper is worth more than gold. For centuries, this wealth flowed through the Silk Road. But in 1453, the walls of Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Empire. The vital artery connecting Europe to the riches of Asia was severed overnight. Europe is financially bleeding out, boxed in by the Atlantic to the west and Islamic empires to the east. The only way to survive is to bypass the blockade, to find a new route to India, enter the Iberian sailors. These aren't elite explorers, they are hardened laborers of the sea. When Columbus pitches his radical and mathematically flawed idea to sail west to reach the east, he recruits men from the gutters and docks of Palos. Their daily life aboard the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria is a masterclass in human endurance. They operate in grueling 4-hour shifts called guardias. When they aren't hauling heavily soaked ropes or pumping putrid water from the hull, they are eating, and the food is atrocious. Their daily ration is a pound of hardtack, a twice-baked bread so hard it has to be soaked in seawater or cheap wine just to chew. By week 3, the hardtack is infested with weevils. The men wait until nightfall to eat it, simply so they don't have to look at the maggots they are swallowing. They sleep on the open deck, exposed to the freezing spray, because the lower decks belong to the cargo. There are no beds. There is no privacy. Just the terrifying, infinite expanse of an ocean that, according to the maps of their time, should have ended 1,000 miles ago. And Columbus? He is keeping 2 separate logbooks, one with the real distance they've traveled, and a fake one with shorter distances, desperately trying to hide from his crew just how far from home they truly are. But the mutiny is stopped by a single piece of driftwood, a carved stick floating in the water. Then, a branch with fresh berries. Someone is out here. While the Spanish sailors clutch their rosaries and scan the horizon, the world they are about to crash into is not the blank canvas that later European history books would claim. It is not an untouched wilderness. and its people are not primitive. The Americas in 1492 are a staggering tapestry of human engineering, boasting a population of roughly 60 million people, more than the population of Europe at the time. Here in the Caribbean, on the island of Guanahani, the Taino people are waking up. Their daily life is a masterclass in adapting to a tropical environment. They live in bohíos, massive circular homes with soaring thatched roofs, engineered specifically to withstand the violent winds of seasonal hurricanes. Inside, they sleep in woven cotton nets suspended from the beams. The Taino call them hamacas. The Spanish will soon steal the design, and the word hammock for their own ships. But survival here requires intense, highly specialized labor. The foundation of their society is a root vegetable called yuca, and processing it is essentially a daily chemistry experiment. Raw yuca is laced with lethal cyanide. Taino women spend hours grating the hard roots on boards studded with sharp stones, then packing the mash into long woven tubes. They hang these tubes from trees, using heavy stones to squeeze out the toxic juices, before baking the safe, dried flour into flat cassava bread. It is a highly efficient, shelf-stable food source that can feed thousands. They are not isolated either. They are a maritime culture. Taino men navigate the open sea in massive dugout canoes, carved from single, colossal mahogany trees. Some of these vessels are nearly 100 feet long, capable of carrying over 100 men. They trade cotton, parrots, and carved stone across a vast invisible highway connecting the Bahamas, Cuba, and Hispaniola. But while the Taino live in a decentralized agricultural society, they are just the outer rim of a continent pulsating with empire. Deep in the mainland, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan is a floating metropolis larger and cleaner than London or Paris, bustling with daily markets where 60,000 people trade obsidian, cacao, and jaguar pelts. High in the Andes, the Inca are engineering earthquake-proof stone cities and a highway system that rivals the Roman Empire. None of them know that 3 wooden ships have just pierced their perimeter. At 2 a.m. on October 12th, a sailor named Rodrigo de Triana, perched in the rigging of the Pinta, sees a white cliff illuminated by the moonlight. He screams, "Tierra! Tierra!" Morning breaks. The anchor is dropped. When Christopher Columbus steps into a rowboat and heads for the shore of Guanahani, he is dressed in heavy velvet and wool, gripping a sword and a royal banner. He is suffocating in the Caribbean heat. On the beach, a crowd of Taino gather. They are completely bare, their skin painted with protective red and black earth to block the sun and repel insects. They watch in total bewilderment as these pale, hairy men drag themselves onto the sand, fall to their knees, and start weeping. Columbus stakes a wooden cross into the sand and declares the land the property of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. What happens next is perhaps the most profound cultural misunderstanding in human history. It starts with trade. It seems entirely peaceful, but the two sides are operating on entirely different psychological wavelengths. The Taino bring out raw cotton, tame parrots, and wooden spears. They are practicing reciprocity, a social system where giving gifts builds alliances and status. The Spanish, however, hand over cheap glass beads, brass bells, and broken pieces of ceramic. The Europeans think they are outsmarting naive locals, trading literal garbage for valuable goods. The Taino, who have never seen glass or smelted brass, view these items as incredibly rare, exotic marvels of craftsmanship. But the piece is an illusion. It is on a countdown timer. As Columbus interacts with the locals, his eyes lock onto a single, tiny detail. A few of the Taino men are wearing small pendants hanging from their noses. Gold. It is a microscopic amount, pounded thin from river nuggets, completely devoid of monetary value to the Taino. They wear it simply because it shines like the sun. But to Columbus, drowning in debt to the Spanish crown, that glint of yellow metal changes everything. In his journal that very night, Columbus doesn't write about the beauty of the culture he has discovered. He writes an assessment. He notes that they have no iron, that they do not know what swords are. He shows them a blade, and they cut their hands, grabbing the edge out of ignorance. Then, he writes the sentence that will seal the fate of millions. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. The vault is officially open. The collision has begun. Columbus will return to Spain a hero, parading kidnapped Taino natives and stolen gold through the streets of Seville. He will return to the Americas 3 more times, bringing with him heavily armed soldiers, war dogs, and forced labor systems. But the true conqueror of the Americas wasn't wearing steel armor. It didn't carry a sword or fire a musket. It was completely invisible. When the Europeans stepped onto the sand, they brought more than their greed. They brought their pathogens. For thousands of years, European and Asian populations had lived in dense, filthy cities in incredibly close proximity to domesticated animals, pigs, cows, and chickens. This constant, unsanitary contact allowed animal diseases to mutate and jump to humans. Over generations, the survivors built up genetic immunities to horrific diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza. The people of the Americas had almost no domesticated livestock. Their cities were cleaner, their hygiene vastly superior to the Europeans. But biologically, this made them tragically vulnerable. They had zero immunity to old world viruses. When the first infected European coughed or handed over a contaminated blanket, they unleashed an apocalyptic biological shockwave. The diseases moved faster than the explorers themselves. Smallpox swept through trade routes like an invisible wildfire. It struck the Inca Empire before a single Spanish soldier ever reached the Andes, killing the emperor and plunging the civilization into a catastrophic civil war. In some regions, the mortality rate was 90%. 90% of the population, gone within a single generation. Villages were left completely abandoned, the crops rotting in the fields, the fires burning out. It is arguably the most devastating demographic collapse in the history of the human species. But this collision didn't just empty a continent. It completely rewired the Earth's biology and economy in an event we now call the Columbian Exchange. The ships returning to Europe carried cargo that would fundamentally alter human evolution. Before 1492, there were no tomatoes in Italy. There were no potatoes in Ireland. There was no chili pepper in Thailand or India, and no chocolate in Switzerland. The introduction of the high-calorie Andean potato to the exhausted soils of Europe caused a massive population boom. European peasants, who previously starved during wheat blights, suddenly had a reliable, nutrient-dense crop that grew underground, safe from trampling armies. This population explosion would ultimately fuel the Industrial Revolution. In return, the Europeans unloaded horses, cows, and pigs onto the American mainland. The horse revolutionized the Plains Indians of North America, creating entirely new nomadic warrior cultures. But the pigs? They were an ecological disaster. Released into the wild by Spanish explorers, feral hogs bred at a terrifying rate, tearing up native crops and devastating the local ecosystem. The discovery of America was not a peaceful meeting of minds. It was a violent, irreversible collision. It destroyed thousands of years of isolated human progress in the Americas, erasing languages, religions, and empires. In their place, the European powers built a brutal new economic machine, one that would soon demand the mass enslavement of millions of Africans to work the sugar and tobacco plantations built on the ashes of the Taino. October 12, 1492, wasn't just a discovery. It was the exact second the planet shrunk. It was the messy, brutal, and profoundly transformative birth of the globalized world we live in today. Every meal you eat, every border on a map, and every demographic on Earth was shaped by those 90 desperate men on 3 wooden ships. As always, We'll see you in the past.